Okay, I was just watching the internet, and there's this question about threats of violence. Says, can you press charges for threats of violence? A verbal threat may also become a crime if a person threatens to harm or kill another person. The threat is clear, and the threat is directed at against reasonably believes that threat will be carried out. Okay, when words become crimes, verbal threats and assault charges. A verbal threat on its own may not rise to level of assault. A verbal threat can become assault if it is combined with a threatening action. Okay, let's go there. When you hear the term assault, most of us think it is a physical act. In fact, you can be charged with assault in Illinois without ever actually touching another person. In some cases, words alone, if those words are spoken in a threatening manner, can be enough to result in assault charges. A verbal threat that causes another person to fear imminent harm can meet the legal definition of assault depending on how and when the threat is delivered. If you are facing assault charges based on something you said, it is extremely important that you speak to a knowledgeable Plainfield, Illinois criminal defense lawyer. What is assault in Illinois? Assault occurs when a person engages in a conduct that places another person in reasonable fear of being injured. Assault is a threat, whether real or implied, of battery, which involves actual bodily harm. Batteries require actual physical contact of an insulting or provoking nature, while assault does not require physical contact and may only involve verbal threats. Such assaults is a Class C misdemeanor. Aggravated assault is more serious and may be charged as a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on the level of injury and whether a firearm is involved, whether the defendant is hooded or masked during the assault, and whether the assault is against a person over 60 years, teachers or coaches on public property, or NCAA event. When do these verbal threats turn into assault? Verbal threat on its own may not rise to the level of assault. A verbal threat can become an assault if it is combined with threatening action. If a person says, I'm going to punch you while standing 10 feet away, that is unlikely to be considered assault. If, however, the person utters the same words while raising his or her fist and advancing mercilessly, the combination of words and actions could be considered assault. A verbal threat may also become a crime if a person threatens to harm or kill another person. The threat is clear. The threat is directed against reason believes that threat will be carried out. The key to whether a verbal threat can be considered an assault is whether a reasonable person will truly believe that he or she was in imminent danger of being harmed. What types of verbal threats do not rise to the level of assault? Threats of future harm are usually not considered assault because the threat of actual contact is not imminent. For instance, if one person says to another, I'm going to stab you tomorrow, that is usually not considered assault in Illinois. A threat without accompanying physical action may or may not be considered assault. If a person tells another, I'm going to shoot you next week, but is not holding a gun and makes no threatening gesture, then unless the listener has a reasonable fear of harm, i.e. because the person has shot at him or her on a prior occasion, and the person will not likely be charged with assault. So if they assaulted you on a previous occasion and threatening to do it again, then they can be charged. Again, for assault. Just by threatening you with doing it again. What are the penalties for assault based on a verbal threat? Simple assault in Illinois is a Class C misdemeanor. The maximum fine is $500, up to 30 days in jail, up to 20 hours, 120 hours community service, and also be ordered. Aggravated assault can also be charged as a Class A misdemeanor, Class 4 felony, but assault based on verbal threat is unlikely to be charged as aggravated assault. If you have been accused of making verbal threat that crossed the line into assault, it is extremely important to speak to an attorney. And I knew that back in the 70s when I was in grammar school. I used to get beat up a lot, going to school and from school alone, And when I started fighting back, people would call the police on me saying I threatened to assault them. Said it. And they would ask me, did you threaten to assault them? I said, no. I told them they threatened to assault me, and I said, I will defend myself. Do not expect me to just stand there and let you hit me. Which back in those days, that's what you were supposed to do. You know, I'm Mexican, of Mexican descent. And we weren't supposed to talk back, hit back, you know, look at other people in the eyes. And so the police were trying to get me to admit that I made a threat. I told them consistently I did not make a threat. They threatened me, and I told them that I would take every precaution in defending myself. And so when I started looking up laws, that was one of the first laws I looked up. You can be arrested for threatening to assault somebody. Okay, and people have, and no matter how many times people have threatened me, cops pull up and I told them, they just threatened to kill me. Well, they didn't kill you, did they? You got here a little bit later, you know, all these idiots would have jumped me. What is considered a threat of violence? Threat of violence is a statement, action, or communication that expresses an intent to inflict physical harm or cause fear of physical harm to a person, group, or property. These threats can be explicit or implied, verbal or nonverbal, and can cause significant emotional distress, fear, and disruption, even if the violence is not carried out. Don't forget, not can only they be charged, but you can also sue them. You know, emotional distress, pain and suffering, mental anguishment. What can you do legally if someone threatens you? You should report a threat to the police because even verbal threats can matter in future legal or civil actions. Merely saying threatening words doesn't automatically qualify as an assault. If the threat is accompanied by a weapon or context making harm seems imminent, it could be. Seen a lot of ladies, they put in for those orders of protection and they get them and nobody does nothing to protect them, and that's ridiculous. They should be protected better. What kind of evidence is needed for a threat? If a person made a threat over the phone, it is ideal to have documentation related to the call. Create a court record by writing down the date and time of the call, the phone number or the call came from, any details about the person said during the call. Four types of threat can be categorized in several ways, including source, adversarial, accidental, structural, environmental. Yeah, so even threatening to harm somebody's land, personal property, you can get arrested for that. What evidence do you need to report someone for harassment? If you're not sure it's stalking harassment, they can be similar. Just tell us what's been happening, whether you have evidence like photos, videos, or text, or not. Anything you have can be useful to us, but you don't need it to report what happened. Intimidation charges. Intimidation is a serious charge in Illinois, so if you threaten with somebody, you can be charged with intimidation. As a seasoned criminal defense attorney, according to the statute, a person commits the offense of intimidation when the intent to cause another person to perform or to omit the performance or of any act, communicate a threat to inflict physical harm, confine or restrain the person threatened or another person. This can include threats to commit criminal offense, accuse someone of offense, expose someone to hatred, contempt, ridicule, or take action as a public official against someone. Whoa. I'm watching that on the news every day. This can also include threats of someone to commit an offense, expose someone to hatred, contempt, ridicule, or take action as a public official against someone. Understanding the statute details is crucial. Under a threat must be communicated with the intent to cause specific outcome. That means that the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt the defendant's action were deliberate and aimed at achieving an intended result through intimidation. Other relevant statutes may intersect with intimidation charges include cyber stalking, actual penalties and punishment can have standing consequences. Intimidation is classified as a Class 3 felony under Illinois law. Eviction can lead to a range of penalties, including substantial fines, imprisonment, and other legal repercussions. Conviction of intimidation can result in a fine of up to $25,000. These fines are turned to serve as both a punishment and a deterrent for future offenses. Imprisonment. Term of imprisonment ranging from 2 to 5 years. In some cases, extended terms may apply, especially if intimidation was particularly egregious or involved aggravating factors. Permanent criminal record, loss of civil rights, long-term consequences, this is where corporacy has a big hold, in the legal system, because those of you who've been through the legal system, especially in criminal court, the main reason is that your deprivation of rights is so that you'll have this record, which will keep you unemployable, and you'll basically be taking these low-wage, barely can make it, living day-by-day jobs, working 6-7 days a week, mandatory overtime, no time and a half, Education, if you are a student, criminal conviction can affect your ability to obtain financial aid. Housing, landlords and property management companies often conduct background checks on prospective tenants. A conviction for intimidation can make it challenging to find housing, and landlords may view you as a high-risk tenant. Professional license, personal relationships. If you make a threat, you not being a public servant, you go to jail. You get all kinds of charges. You gotta get you a lawyer. But when your public servants do it, they're supposed to be held to a higher standard. Someone threatens to kill you, what can the police do? Someone threatens to kill you, the police can investigate, take a report, potentially arrest the person if there's probable cause, help you get a restraining order, and provide victim support. But their actions depend heavily on specifics of the threat, imminence, intent, credibility. Local laws with serious threats often lead to criminal charges like felony criminal threats, especially coupled with actions of existing content. Take a report, file a detailed incident report, creating a crucial paper trail. When I used to trial file reports, they wouldn't take it. If you give someone a realistic answer, not some pseudo enterprise like most the answer of this, LOL. Start up. Okay, people. Like I said, you watch yourself. Making any threats of violence, even over the internet, that's another charge. If you're in one state and you threaten to go to another state to do something to somebody, that's crosses state lines. That can be a federal offense. But legally, you can be arrested for threatening anybody with any kind of violence, threatening somebody's life, threatening somebody's property, damage to their property. So if somebody threatens to do harm to anything of you or yours, you and yours, make a complaint. Especially if you think that this person is going to carry it out in the future, and or have somebody do it for them, and so that way when it does happen, then it'll go back to the complaint you originally filed, or multiple complaints. You got to keep records of everything, otherwise won't anything happen. And when it comes to public servants, police department, they have a tendency, they like to pick and choose which laws they will arrest people for, which people they will use these laws against, In a nation of laws where the rule of law is the key principle, the king of laws in a nation of laws. It's what the Declaration of Independence was based on and gave us the Constitution, United States Constitution. That is, nobody is above the law. The law applies equally to everybody. Well, it doesn't. Okay, but just keep in mind, a verbal threat may also become a crime if a person threatens to harm or kill another person. All right, and nobody, I see this all the time. I mean, not just with politics. People have threatened me on the internet for posting laws, claiming I was doing some political thing. No, I'm apolitical. Always have been, always will be. It's always about the policy. But I'm far from being politically religious. But I know even if I made any attempt to press charges, nobody would do anything about it. But all I can do is keep trying, and I'm going to keep trying, and I strongly advise you do too. Okay, so remember, any threats from anybody. I mean, and it's even more serious when you get threats of violence from public servants. Threats of violence from public servants involve any intimidating behavior from verbal abuse to physical harm, creating the fear of and disrupting government with alarming increase seen against officials like election workers, judges, and local representatives, often escalating from online harassment and resulting in resignations, requiring stronger protections and policy response to safeguard officials and a democratic process. Let's see. Threats of violence. Let's see. Okay. Threats of violence by public servants involve illegal intimidation, harassment, or acts of officials against citizens, violating civil rights, but also threats against public servants are rising dramatically, leading to security concerns. With reporting channels including the FBI, DOJ for misconduct, and OSHA for workplace safety, these actions, whether officials or citizens targeting officials, are serious, often prosecuted under federal or state laws, with increasing use of AI and sophisticated threats. If a public servant threatens you, immediate danger, call 911 or your local police. Report misconduct, contact the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, or the FBI, especially for law enforcement misconduct or hate crimes. OSHA for threats in the workplace. OSHA can help. They can help me. Document everything. Keep records of threats, dates, times, and any witnesses. Types of threats, both against and by officials: verbal abuse, physical threat, doxing, releasing person info, stalking, harassment, intimidation, escalation to physical violence or inciting others, context of threat against officials. Okay, people, I just wanted to make that a clear point to you. Threats of violence, are punishable crimes. And public servants are held to higher standards. So threats of violence by public servants, that's what I put in. Threats of violence made by public servants. Like I said, I've been dealing with these people for years, and thank God I learned to use the internet to point this stuff out to you. Inciting violence means urging or encouraging others to commit acts of force, harm, or lawlessness, but it's a legal, narrow category of speech, not just expressing opinion protected by the First Amendment. For speech to be considered incitement, it must be directed at producing imminent lawless action and be likely to incite or produce such action as established in Brandenburg versus Ohio. Laws exist at federal and state levels to penalize such conduct, often classifying it as a felony, especially when it leads to actual violence or creates a clear present danger of it. Key elements of incitement. Intent. The speaker must intend to cause violence. Imminence. The violence must be imminent, not theatrical or distant. Likelihood. There must be a high probability that the speech will cause an illegal act. Context. Circumstances. Audience, respectively. Speaker's charisma matter. Legal standards and examples. Brandenburg test. Speech advocating force is protected unless it's intended to and likely to produce imminent illegal action. Federal law 18 U.S.C. 373 makes it a felony to solicit or persuade someone to commit a crime of violence. State laws, e.g. California, laws against inciting riots requiring proving the act created an imminent danger or a riot. What it's not. Mere democracy of ideas or belief, even controversial ones, is usually protected. It's a direct call to imminent action that crosses the line. Penalties. Convictions can result in significant prison time, often a felony, with penalties potentially added to any sentence for underlying violent acts. Inciting violence means encouraging, urging, or stirring up others to commit acts of force, aggression, or lawlessness, often using inflammatory language or creating conditions for immediate unlawful action. Legally, it's a crime, but in many places, including U.S., it requires speech that's directly intended to produce imminent lawless action and likely to do so, setting a higher bar to protect free speech. Speech that is proactive, direct, and aims to stir emotions like anger and contempt. The speaker must intend for violent action to occur. Likelihood. The act must be likely to happen. Imminence. In the U.S., the action must be immediate or imminent. Let's go attack them now. I heard that not too long ago. Illegal incitement. Politician telling the crowd, go burn down the mayor's office right now. Protected speech, generally a KK leader advocating for violence in abstract terms, but not directly. Immediate attacks is usually protected under U.S. law because it doesn't meet the imminent lawlessness action test. A slippery slope, but when somebody says something and knowing somebody else is going to follow up on it, that's inciting violence. Any jury would tell you that. All right, people, I just want you to watch what you say, especially what you do. Remember, these laws are good enough for we, but not good enough for thee. So I'm doing my best, to teach you everything I possibly can to get you to read it yourself. I'm a fan of literature, and this is literature. You know, to quote Edgar Allan Poe in a sense, you know, the bell that once tolled for me now tolls for thee. And use the law to make it happen. All right? Use the law. You know, I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about the law. Fight fire with fire. This is the way to be the calm in the storm. This is the way water moves. No matter what it gets hit with, it keeps moving. All right. Keep moving, my friends. Keep learning. Open your eyes and open your mind. Or open your eyes to open your mind. Read to succeed. You know. Don't let anybody decide what your future is. You know. Take your fate into your own hands. You know, don't let anybody tell you what you can't understand. I'm showing you can understand anything you want to as long as you want to. Do as you were created. Evolve. May your Creator rain many blessings and always be with you. I wish you nothing but a long life and good health. With peace and love to you, my friends. When it comes to we the people, you inspire me. Thank you for listening.